Now, everybody's talking about climate resilience and it rolls off the tongue very smoothly. And I think a lot of people struggle with the concept of climate resilience. What does it actually mean to me? What does it mean to other businesses? What does it mean to my business? And part of my role is to explore how we can have a look at this in a twofold basis. The one is, how do we mitigate climate resilience for the bank? And how do we mitigate climate resilience for our clients? And when we get into this, you'll see very closely why I'm actually drawing that distinction. So what is climate resilience? Resilience is very loosely determined to be the ability to bounce back after an event, whether it is unpleasant or a disaster, whatever it is. How do you bounce back? Climate resilience just talks about climate change and the event that goes with it. So when you have a disaster like the floods in KZN a couple of months ago, when you have a disaster like the floods in the West Rand, or no water in the Cape, those are events that are climate driven, and we have to have a look at how do we prepare ourselves as a company against those events. How do we make sure that it doesn't take us down? We have to close our doors. And how do we also make sure that the society that we operate in can bounce back, if we use that term like that. So it's a very broad concept and it works both ways. It's really in the eyes of the beholder. Climate resilience means something totally different to me than it does to the CEO of a large organization, because I'm looking at it from an individual perspective. Possibly he's looking at it from his or she's looking at it from her business perspective. That raises the immediate question, if that's the definition and that's what we're looking at, who's responsible for that? And the short answer is we all are. It's a collaborative activity that we've got to go through. And at a business level, it's not the CEO, or it's not the operations guy, or it's not the transport manager, or whatever it is, logistics manager. It's all of us, from the board level right down to the operations level. We are all responsible for this. So that's great. So what does it mean? How do I as a business go about creating a climate resilience strategy? Well, the first step is that one's got to remember the acronym, I call it MAT, and it basically comes down to the climate agenda, which is mitigate, adapt, and transform. So one creates an agenda that has a look at these various aspects on how to look at how to deal with it. And it takes a lot of research, and that's why the next step or the next way to have a look at this is by collaboration. And when I say collaboration, it's not necessarily with your colleagues. It could also be collaboration with other businesses in other jurisdictions that are going through the same issue, or other businesses that are in the same business as you are, how they're dealing with it. Then one has got to have a look at it, instead of just seeing this as a huge cost. One's got to look at it in the eyes of opportunity that it presents. Every event, every risk presents an opportunity, and there are so many opportunities in this aspect. Then how do you mitigate that? You can mitigate it by first cleaning up your own act, reducing your carbon footprint, reducing your green emissions, and trying to get it going on that basis. But it also has a looks at what happens when that event strikes you. Do you have the adequate insurance? Are your supply chains in position so that you can reorganize it? Think of COVID-19, how quickly we had to react, how quickly we had to adapt. And we did it because we had to. The same as with this. The question here is how do we go about it? What are the risks? Well, there's four major risks that one can look at. And the first one is financial losses. Your company can get sued for being a polluter. Your company can get sued for poisoning the water. It can get sued for damage for the society around it, people to take a class action. So one's got to be very sure that you are not the problem in this whole structure. Your infrastructure and your supply chain needs to be very robust. You've got to have a look at how can you protect it, how can you insure it, how can you mitigate any losses in that come from it. Then one's got to look at your own reputation, how communities accept you, and how are you perceived by your stakeholders. The last risk that one can look in broad categories is the very new or latest term of stranded assets. You've got to be very, very certain that you don't have a business that is running some kind of operation that in a couple of years' time is going to be obsolete. Think, for example, of fossil fuels, of coal mines, those kinds of things. Not because they're necessarily bad, but because industry is moving away from it. And you don't want that to be your sole offering or your only product or your only asset. Imagine owning let's use an example, a coal mine or a fuel station in a couple of years' time when electronic vehicles become the norm. I go on about opportunities. I'm always tend to look at the bright side of things, and the opportunities are, what new business products can I develop out of this? Look at how quickly the renewable energy market exploded with products and how fast technology is developing. One can have a look at all kinds of things that can assist your clients. Think, for example, if we talk drought, what about drought-resistant seeds that can grow in those kinds of situations? What about heat-resistant building materials for global warming? What about water harvesting services? So much of our water just goes to waste. Low drip irrigation or efficient irrigation on farms, very, very important. And there's some great products that are developing at the moment. And then last but not least, the insurance industry can have a good look at how can they mitigate these losses and issues that go ahead. Then finally, one of the opportunities is the demographic that is involved here. Think of Generation X, think of the millennials. They are very, very aware of climate change. They are the generation that's going to inherit this planet. And if they decide that your company may not be on the right track, they can very quickly boycott you. Just think of the power that somebody like Greta Thunberg has got. You may not like her, you may find her rude or whatever the case is, but she is generating a lot of interest and a big movement that is going with it. So one's got to have a look at what their needs are and how they want to go. In a nutshell, we're faced with a very stark choice. We can prepare now or we can pay later, but it's something that we've all got to do and make a decision, because no decision is also a decision. Thanks.